James Calhoun rode into Marrow Creek with a coffin and a prayer. But when the sheriff asked for money to release his dead brother's body, James reached for something heavier than coins. The sun beat down on James Calhoun's back, turning his shirt damp with sweat. Dust devils danced across the flat, cracked earth, swirling around his horse's hooves. He squinted, his eyes gritty from the wind that never seemed to stop blowing. 3 days he'd been riding, the wooden coffin bumping softly in the back of his wagon. Marrow Creek. The name tasted like ash in his mouth. It was there in that dusty speck on the map that his younger brother, Billy, had met his end. A telegram, short and cold, had delivered the news. Billy Calhoun deceased. Suspicious circumstances. Come immediately. Suspicious circumstances. James knew what that usually meant in a town like Marrow Creek. It meant someone got away with something, and the truth was buried deeper than any grave. Billy wasn't a troublemaker. He was kind, honest, and always ready with a smile. Someone must have had a good reason to want him gone. James gripped the reins tighter. He wasn't just bringing Billy home for a proper burial. He was bringing him home justice. He pictured Billy's face, young and full of life, and a hard resolve settled in his chest. Marrow Creek was about to learn that messing with a Calhoun came with a price. The town of Marrow Creek looked as parched and unwelcoming as its name. Buildings sagged under the weight of the sun, and the only movement came from stray dogs sniffing in the dirt. James guided his wagon toward the only building that looked remotely official, the sheriff's office. He stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling a hollow tune. A man sat behind a large desk, boots propped up, a star pinned crookedly to his chest. This had to be the sheriff. "Help you, mister," the sheriff drawled, not bothering to remove his boots. "I'm James Calhoun," James said, his voice low. "I'm here about my brother, Billy." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Calhoun, huh? Yeah, we got him. Unfortunate accident." "Accident?" James repeated, his hand instinctively moving toward the .44 at his hip. "That's right, but," the sheriff leaned forward, a glint in his eye, "seeing as the case is still under investigation, there's a small fee for releasing the body." James stared at him, disbelief turning to anger. "A fee? You want me to pay you to bury my brother?" The sheriff shrugged. "Town rules, $20. James refused to pay. "That's highway robbery," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I want to see my brother." The sheriff sneered. "Suit yourself, but don't go causing any trouble." He jerked his head toward a back room. "He's in there." The sight of Billy lying on a cold slab nearly broke James. He looked smaller, younger than James remembered. The gunshot wound in his chest was a dark, ugly stain. James closed his eyes, fighting back tears. He would not let these men see him weak. Afterward, James walked out onto the dusty street, his mind racing. He needed to get Billy out of this town, but something felt wrong. He watched the sheriff leave the office and head toward the saloon. James followed, keeping his distance. He saw the sheriff meet with a stern-looking man in a suit, the judge, he guessed, and a burly man with a handlebar mustache who must be the saloon owner. They huddled together, talking in low voices, glancing nervously around. There was a tension in the air, a sense of secrets being shared. James knew in his gut that these three men were connected, and that Billy's death was more than just an unfortunate accident. Something rotten was festering in Marrow Creek. James remembered a time when Billy was just a skinny kid, always trailing after him, full of questions and laughter. Billy had a knack for finding stray animals, nursing them back to health, and always standing up for the underdog. Even when he was younger, Billy possessed a strong moral compass. He recalled one summer when a wealthy landowner tried to cheat their family out of their water rights. Billy, barely 10 years old, had stood up to the man, arguing with surprising eloquence about fairness and justice. James had been so proud. That same sense of fairness led Billy to become a surveyor, ensuring fair land distribution, which brought him to Marrow Creek. Billy had written letters, full of excitement about the new town and the possibilities it held. But the last few letters had been different, filled with vague concerns and warnings about powerful men. James hadn't understood it then, but now, looking back, the pieces were starting to fit together. Whatever Billy had discovered in Marrow Creek had put him in danger. James clenched his fists. He owed it to his brother to find out the truth, no matter the cost. He had to uncover what Billy found. Mies walked into the saloon, the same one where he'd seen the sheriff, judge, and saloon owner meeting. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of stale beer. He scanned the room, looking for anyone who might know something. He approached the bartender, a weary-looking man wiping down the counter. "I'm looking for information about my brother, Billy Calhoun," James said, placing a silver dollar on the bar. He was a surveyor here. The bartender's eyes darted nervously around the room. "Don't know nothing," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. James pressed harder. "He was murdered. Someone must have seen something." The bartender shook his head, his face pale. "Best let it go, mister. This ain't your fight." James sighed. Fear hung heavy in the air, silencing the townsfolk. He tried a different approach, asking general questions about the town, the land, the people. He learned that the town had been struggling lately, with many families losing their land. He heard whispers of unfair deals and shady business practices. The same names kept coming up: the sheriff, the judge, and the saloon owner, Mr. Harding. It was becoming clearer. He would keep digging. As James left the saloon, two men stepped out of the shadows, blocking his path. They were big, burly, and wore the same menacing expressions. "You're asking too many questions, mister," one of them growled, cracking his knuckles. "It's time you left Marrow Creek." James stood his ground, his eyes narrowed. "I'm not leaving until I find out what happened to my brother." The other man chuckled. "You don't get it, do you? This town is under our protection, and we don't take kindly to outsiders sticking their noses where they don't belong." "Who are you working for?" James asked, his hand instinctively reaching for the .44 beneath his coat. "That ain't your concern." The first man stepped closer, his eyes filled with malice. "Now, are you going to leave peacefully, or are we going to have to persuade you?" James stared them down, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice hard, "and I'm not going anywhere." He knew this was a test. They wanted to see if he could be intimidated. He would show them just how wrong they were. He would not be intimidated. He would do what was necessary. The tension hung thick in the air like the smell of rain before a storm. The two men exchanged glances, surprised by James's defiance. The first man lunged, throwing a punch. James sidestepped, the blow whistling past his ear. He grabbed the man's arm, twisted it sharply, and sent him sprawling to the ground. The second man hesitated, then charged. James met him head-on, delivering a swift kick to the gut. The man doubled over, gasping for air. James stood over them, his .44 now drawn and pointed at the sky. "I don't want to hurt you," James said, his voice calm but firm. "I just want to know the truth, but if you try to stop me, I will defend myself." The two men, bruised and defeated, scrambled to their feet and backed away, muttering threats under their breath. James watched them go, then holstered his gun. He knew he'd made enemies, but he'd also sent a message. He wasn't someone to be trifled with. The townspeople watched from windows and doorways. He needed to find someone who was willing to speak freely. His search continued. He turned toward the edge of town. There was a small, run-down house on the outskirts. He'd heard rumors of an old woman who knew everything that happened in Marrow Creek. It was time to pay her a visit. The old woman, Martha, sat on her porch, rocking slowly in a creaky chair. Her face was etched with wrinkles, each one telling a story of hardship and resilience. She looked at James with knowing eyes. "I know why you're here, son," she said, her voice raspy but clear. "You're here about Billy." James nodded. "I want to know the truth." Martha sighed. "The truth is a dangerous thing in Marrow Creek. Sheriff, judge, and Harding, they run this town. They've been stealing land from the people, using lies and threats." James listened intently. "Your brother, Billy, he found out about their scheme. He was a surveyor, and he saw how they were changing the maps, cheating people out of their property." Martha paused, her eyes filled with sadness. "He tried to help the townspeople, but they silenced him, made it look like an accident." James felt a surge of anger, hot and fierce. So it wasn't just a hunch, it was the truth. His brother had died trying to do the right thing. He said, "Why didn't anyone come forward?" "They are afraid. They've seen what these men are capable of, but you stood up to them. You've given them hope. Do right by your brother, son." She looked up at James, and for the first time a glimmer of hope shone from her eyes. Mies walked back toward town, his mind made up. He couldn't just bury Billy and leave. He had to do something. He owed it to his brother, and he owed it to the people of Marrow Creek. He would fight for justice. He spent the rest of the day gathering information. He talked to a few more townsfolk, those who were brave enough to whisper their stories in the shadows. He learned about specific land deals, the names of the families who had been wronged, and the methods the sheriff, judge, and Harding used to cheat them. As dusk settled, James sat in his wagon, sharpening his knife. He had a plan, a risky one, but it was the only way. He would confront the three men, expose their crimes, and give the townspeople a chance to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. He knew it wouldn't be easy. They would fight back, but he was ready. He checked his .44, making sure it was loaded and ready. He looked at the coffin in the back of the wagon. "I'll make you proud, Billy," he whispered. He had a debt to pay. Marrow Creek would learn what happens when you push a Calhoun too far. He would give them one chance. Then he would take justice into his own hands. The saloon was even more crowded than before, the air thick with anticipation. James strode through the swinging doors, his presence silencing the room. He spotted the sheriff, judge, and Harding sitting at their usual table, glasses of whiskey in front of them. He walked straight toward them, his eyes fixed on the sheriff. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice booming through the saloon, "I know what you've been doing." The three men exchanged nervous glances. Harding tried to bluff. "What are you talking about, Calhoun?" James ignored him, addressing the entire room. "These men have been stealing land from the people of Marrow Creek, cheating families out of their homes and livelihoods." A murmur rippled through the crowd. James continued, "My brother Billy found out about their scheme and they silenced him. They murdered him." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I'm giving you a chance to confess, to return what you've stolen and face justice." The sheriff laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're a fool, Calhoun, you have no proof." James's eyes hardened. "I have the truth, and the people of Marrow Creek deserve to know it." The sheriff slammed his fist on the table, sending glasses flying. "Arrest him," he roared. "He's disturbing the peace." Two deputies rushed forward, guns drawn. James reacted instantly, drawing his own. 44. The room erupted in chaos. People screamed and scattered, diving for cover. The first deputy fired. James ducked behind a table, the bullet splintering the wood above his head. He returned fire, hitting the deputy in the shoulder. The deputy cried out and fell to the floor. The second deputy charged, firing wildly. James rolled out of the way, narrowly avoiding the bullets. He aimed carefully and fired, hitting the second deputy in the leg. The deputy crumpled to the ground. The sheriff and Harding scrambled for cover behind the bar. The judge dove under the table, whimpering. The gunfight raged, bullets flying, the air thick with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. James knew he was outnumbered, but he was determined to fight until the truth was revealed. He had to protect the townspeople. He had to avenge Billy. The town held its breath, waiting to see who would win. Justice or corruption? The answer would soon be known. Mies knew he couldn't win this fight alone. He needed the townspeople to see the truth and to stand with him. He used the brief lulls in the gunfight to shout, his voice ringing with conviction. "They're stealing your land," he yelled, dodging another bullet. "They killed my brother for trying to help you. Are you going to let them get away with it?" He saw faces in the crowd, fear mixed with a flicker of something else, hope. He pointed to Harding, who was nervously peeking out from behind the bar. "He's the one who falsifies the documents. He's the one who cheats you out of your property." Then he turned toward the judge, who was still cowering under the table. "And he's the one who looks the other way. He's supposed to uphold the law, but he's just as corrupt as the rest of them." He fired another shot, forcing the sheriff to duck back behind the bar. "They think they can control you with fear. They think they can get away with anything, but they're wrong. You have the power to stop them." His words hung in the air, mingling with the smoke and the screams. He could see the change in the townspeople's eyes. They were starting to believe him. He hoped they would join him. A man stepped forward, a farmer named Jebediah who had lost his land to Harding's schemes. He grabbed a bottle from a table and hurled it at the sheriff, hitting him in the head. The sheriff staggered, momentarily stunned. Then another person stepped forward, and another, until the entire saloon was filled with angry townspeople. They grabbed chairs, bottles, anything they could find, and charged toward the sheriff, judge, and Harding. The sheriff's men, outnumbered and overwhelmed, quickly surrendered. The sheriff, judge, and Harding tried to escape, but the townspeople blocked their path. "We're taking our town back," Jebediah shouted, his voice filled with newfound courage. James watched as the townspeople, finally free from their fear, apprehended the three men. He holstered his gun, a sense of relief washing over him. It was over. The people of Marrow Creek had found their voice and they had chosen justice. He knew the fight wasn't truly over. There would be trials and lawyers and all sorts of legal battles, but the most important battle had been won. The people of Marrow Creek were no longer afraid. They would fight for what was rightfully theirs. James could finally lay Billy to rest. The battle was won. The town was safe. Justice had come to Marrow Creek. The next morning, a wagon carrying the sheriff, judge, and Harding rumbled out of Marrow Creek, headed for the county jail. A new sheriff, chosen by the townspeople themselves, stood tall and proud, ready to lead Marrow Creek into a brighter future. The town square, once filled with fear and despair, buzzed with activity. Families who had lost their land were working with surveyors to redraw the maps, ensuring fair distribution. The saloon, now under new management, was filled with laughter and music. Marrow Creek was finally free. James watched from a distance, a quiet satisfaction in his heart. He had done what he came to do. He had avenged his brother's death and brought justice to a town in need. He had kept his promise to Billy. Martha approached him, a warm smile on her face. "You did good, son," she said, patting his arm. "You brought hope back to Marrow Creek." James smiled back. "It was the people of Marrow Creek who did it," he said. "I just showed them the way." He knew that the healing process would take time, but Marrow Creek was on the right path. They had learned a valuable lesson, that even in the darkest of times, justice can prevail if people are willing to stand up for what is right. It was time for him to leave. It was time to say goodbye. With the town safe and a new sheriff in place, James finally took Billy to the small hillside overlooking Marrow Creek. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He dug a grave beneath a lone oak tree, the scent of fresh earth filling the air. As he lowered the coffin into the ground, tears welled up in his eyes. He spoke softly. "I did what I could, Billy. I brought you justice. I hope you can rest in peace now." He filled the grave, smoothing the earth over the coffin. He fashioned a simple wooden cross and placed it at the head of the grave. He stood there for a long time, remembering Billy, the good times they had shared, the dreams they had once held. Finally, he turned and walked back to his wagon. He climbed in, took one last look at Marrow Creek, and then flicked the reins. The wagon lurched forward, and he began the long journey home. He left Marrow Creek a better place, a place where justice had prevailed. He knew that Billy would be proud. The sun set, casting long shadows behind him. James rode on. He would never forget Marrow Creek or his brother, Billy. Their memory would always be with him. He left the town in good hands. He knew they could take it from here. The road stretched out before James, long and dusty, but his heart felt lighter than it had in days. He had faced danger and hardship, but he had done the right thing. He had honored his brother's memory and brought justice to a town that had lost its way. The story of James, Calhoun, and Marrow Creek would be told and retold, a reminder that even one person can make a difference. It would be a story about courage, about standing up for what is right, even when the odds seem impossible. He thought about Billy, about his kindness and his unwavering belief in justice. He knew that Billy would be proud of him, and that was all that mattered. He knew that Billy's spirit would live on in the hearts of the people of Marrow Creek. James smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He had come to Marrow Creek seeking closure, seeking to bury his brother. But he had found something more. He had found a town worth fighting for, and he had found the strength within himself to make a difference. He knew that justice was always worth fighting for, and that even in the darkest of times, hope can prevail. His journey was over, but his story would live on. The end.